Without further ado, please let me introduce the SIF data analyst, Ms. Rebecca Fraser. Rebecca, please take it away.
Hi, well, thank you guys so much for joining us on the call today. It's always a pleasure to get to connect with each of you. And so the purpose of today's call, as Katie mentioned, is to review the data supplement. So I'll be going through the supplement tab by tab and highlighting some significant changes that we've made in terms of the content and the format of the data supplement, and also going over a couple of the common areas where folks tend to have a little bit more difficulty in terms of reporting the information. Also, I'll be walking you through the sample data supplement that all of you should have received via email. So I'll share my screen so you can follow along with that. But if you have any questions afterwards, you can always go back and look at the data supplement on your own at a later time. So the first thing I wanted to do is to just emphasize that there are a lot of resources available to you as you complete your data supplement, the first of which being the data supplement user guide. So you should have received an updated copy of that document. I'm sharing my screen here, and you can see this is the first page of that Word document. And that includes screenshots of each of the tabs of the data supplement, as well as examples of the content included in the supplement and commonly asked questions. In addition to the user guide, we also sent you a document with instructions for submitting your progress report narrative. Just as a reminder, you will be submitting the narrative through eGrants, whereas your data supplement will be submitted to your program officer over email. And then the last document that I wanted to remind you about is the FAQ document. So this contains some of the most commonly asked questions about the SIF data supplement, and it's a great resource as you're completing the supplement itself. All right, so I'm going to take a moment just to share my screen here and let you look at the data supplement itself. And we're going to start with the project plan tab. So as Katie mentioned, we're going to go tab by tab, and then we'll stop at the end of each tab and open the floor for questions. And I'd really encourage you to ask for whatever questions you might have as we go. There are only good questions that will benefit the group, so please don't be shy. So the first tab is the project plan tab. It contains information about your program, and we use this information to respond to data requests and also to track programs in particular regions, as well as information about your budget. So the first section of the project plan tab contains mostly programmatic information. So one of the things that's new for this time is that we are asking you to report on the start and end date of your award. And just to clarify, this is specified in your user guide, but the start and end dates should match your period of performance per your notice of funding availability. So those dates have been pre-populated for all of you, but if you notice any errors in this, please feel free to correct those. Also, just as a general rule, anytime you make changes to the content in the data supplement, we would just ask that you highlight those cells in green. So I'm going to see if I can do that for you as just an example. So let's say your end date actually changed. You can go ahead and highlight that cell in green and put it in bold. And then when you submit your data supplement back to your program officer, we ask that you notify them of any changes that you've made to the document in that email. So in addition to providing basic information about your organization in terms of the address and location and focus areas, we also ask that you include a one-paragraph description of your organization. We use this for the website and also in responding to data requests. So we've actually, in this round of the user guide, we've included a sample of what kinds of information it can be useful to include. So if you're not quite sure what should go in that paragraph, I'd encourage you to have a look at the updated user guide so that you can see an example here. Now, after you complete the basic programmatic information, we have asked you to complete information about the budget for your award. So this budget is broken up in the first section by fiscal year. So let's say, like in this situation, we have a grantee who in FY 2016 received a $2 million award, and then that award is intended to be dispersed across 2 program years. So they have a subsidiary budget for program year 1 of $1 million, and then they would have a separate subsidiary budget for program year 2 in eGrants that's also for $1 million. And then you see that they received another award in FY 2018 for $2.6 million, also to be dispersed across 2 program years. So just to clarify, this budget information should match your approved budget in eGrants. So if you have some other working budget that you are dealing with, just keep in mind that this information does need to correspond to your approved budget in eGrants. And the reason for that is so that your program officer can contact you if there need to be any adjustments to that budget. So if, for example, you needed to do a budget amendment. Then down below, in the next section, we have budget information by fiscal year. And so in this section, we ask you to provide a detailed breakdown of what percentage, what amount of your funding is going to go to subgrants versus non-subgrants. And so that information, that breakdown is provided here. All of the budget information has been pre-populated with the exception of some of the 2016 grantees. So if you are a new 2016 grantee, this breakdown may not be provided in your existing data supplement, but we would ask that you just go back to your eGrants budget, and if you refer to your user guide, it contains some really detailed instructions about how to calculate this breakdown. But essentially, you're separating out funds that are going to subgrants from non-sub-related costs. So those would be like administrative or overhead costs typically. And so you would do that for each award, keeping in mind that, so for example, if you have one award that encompasses multiple program years, this would be the budget across both of those program years. So you would want to add up the amounts from subsidiary budget 1 and 2 in this case, because there are 2 program years encompassed in this budget for the FY 2016 award. And then you would do that for each of your awards. One other thing that we've done that's new is we've added in a little reference here to the FFR. So if you want to check these numbers against your FFR, you can do so by looking at this total. So in this case, this 5.9, the cumulative fiscal year target should match the total federal funds authorized, which is FFR line 10D, if you wanted to cross-check this document. And the same thing would also be true for the total match to be received. So in your FFR, if you wanted to look at the total grantee share to be received, that corresponds to this cumulative fiscal year target for what we've labeled as the total match to be received. Now, the most substantial change that we've made to the data supplement is that we are no longer asking you to report information on your actual expenditures to date. So we've completely removed that information from the data supplement. So for those of you who have completed the data supplement in the past, we hope that this is going to significantly reduce your reporting burden. Instead of reporting that information through the data supplement, we're now asking you to report expenditure information exclusively through the FFR. So you're no longer doing that in the data supplement. But what we are asking you to report on is information on match funds received, because the match funds received are not included in your FFR. So we would ask you to provide us with updates on the funds that have been received but not yet expended or potentially expended, right? So funds that have come in, whether or not you've expended them. The other thing to keep in mind here is that we've also added in a glossary of terms. So if you have any questions about this, you can always take a look at the glossary of terms at the end of the tab for a little bit more information in addition to the information that's contained in your user guide. So our next 2 tabs ask for information on your match funders. And so you're not required to report on all of your match funders, but we do ask that you report on at least the top 5 match funders. One significant change from the last supplement to this one is that we're no longer asking you to report on the exact amount of funds contributed from each funding partner. Instead, we just ask that you list the name of the funder, the location of that funder, their status, like whether or not they have made a contribution during the current reporting period. So those who have made contributions during this reporting period would be active. Those who had made contributions in the past but not during the current reporting period would be inactive. And then you can also include comments about the funder. So if this is an opportunity for you to communicate with your program officer about how things are going, if there are any concerns that they should know about, or any important updates to that relationship. And then the same thing would also apply for our subgrantee match funders. So here we ask that you list the top 5 match funders for each subgrantee. And you would list for each of those subgrantees the funding partner, the location of that partner, this subgrantee or subrecipient that the partner is supporting, and then the status of that funder. And again, you can include comments if you would like, and all of our funders for Classic are going to be cash. So I think I saw a question.
We do have a question that says, so they are considered inactive if they don't provide funding during that period. What if the grant from the match funder is active?
So you're saying that they didn't provide any funds during the current period, but they're still considered an active funder. So like they may contribute again in the future, right? Is that what you're asking, Laura? So they didn't give anything right now, but you still have an active and ongoing relationship with them, and you're anticipating that they may contribute additional funds in the future. Is that right? Yes, okay, great. So in that situation, yes, you would mark them as inactive, and then the next reporting period, as soon as they start giving again, you would list them as active, and that's okay. That just gives us a sense of who you're working with at the current moment, like who is contributing right now.
So Nora, I think, adds to that conversation that says, or their contribution covers multiple reporting periods.
That's fine, yeah. So if they've contributed and it's designed to be dispersed, say, across multiple program periods, it's fine to list them as active across each of those periods.
So, yeah, so Laura further explains the cash comes in December, but the program is from January to December of the next year. So they provide cash in December and then do not provide cash again until for that next year.
Yeah, so I think that, like, Kimberly is weighing in on this, and I think her vote is that they can be active. I think the goal here is really to just get a sense of who are you currently working with. So if someone has made a contribution, you're just not really having a continued relationship with them anymore, I would say list them as inactive. But if there's someone that you are currently working with and you're still expending those funds, I think it makes sense to list them as active. That's a good question, though. I think we do get a lot of questions about it. The other thing I'll mention, too, is that we do have a status under grantee match funders that's for projected. So if you have funders that you're sort of in the process of working with, but you haven't actually received any funds from them yet, you can list them in that projected status, and that allows your program officer to kind of check in on how that's going and to keep tabs on if there's any additional support you need around those funders. All right. Any other questions about this, about the match funders tab? That was a good question from both of you guys.
I don't see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A.
You can press *1 if you want to
explain your question a little further. Here we go. From okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about our sub-info tab. So this is, I know, some of the program officers' favorite tabs because it's really the place where we get to know the nuanced information about the relationships that you're building with your subgrantees, the areas that they're operating in, and it's really the place that we go when we get data requests. It's the first place that we go to look for example, what kinds of programs do we have with mental health? And so in this tab, we ask you to provide information about each of your subgrantees. You would list the name of the subgrantee. The subgrantee number is pre-populated, so if you're a new grantee or if you have new subs that you've added, this field will stay blank. We'll fill that in on our end, so you can just leave that blank. And then you would specify whether they're active or inactive, again, keeping in mind that designation is specific to the current reporting period. So if they were active at any point during the current reporting period, we're going to list them as active. But if they were inactive throughout the entirety of the reporting period, they would be inactive. Also, we ask that you provide some information about each of your subs. Who are they working with? What's their focus area? What kinds of interventions are they doing? Keeping in mind that these latter cells under intervention type and outcome focus are contingent, so you do have to select a focus area, and then depending upon what focus area you select, we're going to show different options under the possible outcome focuses. Also, the more specific you can be with this information, the better for us. So if you can tell us, you know, this program is really operating in this kind of intervention, rather than just selecting other. I think that's really useful for us so that we can very quickly and efficiently respond to data requests. In addition to that, we also ask that you provide a one-paragraph description of the program and information on key successes during the current reporting period. So that's a change actually from what we've asked in the past. So in the past, we've asked about key successes a little bit more generally, and now we really want those key successes to be things that happened during the current reporting period. So, providing that information to us in this way makes it easier for us to really highlight the successes that you've had right now, and especially given the current environment where the administration has changed, we're really trying to pull together successes and really highlight the impact of your work, and this is a real opportunity for you to share with us some of the great things that you guys are doing on the ground. Then the last piece of information is address information. So we ask for the full address, including the ZIP+4 code. That ZIP+4 code is really important because when we talk to folks in Congress, we need to be able to tell them about programs that are in their district, and we can't do that unless we have that ZIP+4 code. So we really appreciate you guys providing that information. And then also information on the primary contact for each of your subgrantee organizations.
So I have a question. It says, I am curious about the column on key successes. I noticed that we are also listing a summary on each subgrantee in the narrative report. Should this be different from column L in the data supplement?
That's a great question. Katie, do you want to take that one?
So key successes in the data supplement truly are like output-based key successes for that particular subgrantee. When you're in the data, in the progress report itself, yeah, you can give a 1- or 2-line summary for each grantee in that, but then when it talks about one of the great stories that you might have about a subgrantee, that's more storytelling, and that is really giving us a picture of how your program has benefited your community. So that's really the difference in those 3 different areas between the progress report and the data supplement. Again, key successes data supplement is really output-based, and then the key successes in the progress report are really based off of quick summaries and then storytelling.
Mm-hmm. It's okay just to add to that. I mean, it's all right if there's some overlap between those documents. We're not expecting that you're going to completely reinvent the wheel, but having the data in this format allows us to access it a lot more quickly than in the narrative format. It's more searchable, it's indexable, and this is really the place that we go to first when we get those urgent data requests. So, the more information you can provide here in particular, this gives us that fast searchable repository of information on your key successes. Does that address your question?
She says okay.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about our sub-awards tab. So this is where we collect information on each of your sub-grantee awards. The major thing that you will notice if you are a returning grantee is that just like the project plan tab, we have removed expenditure information from this tab. So we are no longer asking you to report out on expenditures at the sub-grantee level. Of course, we still strongly encourage you to track that information. If you're ever audited, you might be asked to account for that information, but we're not doing it through the data supplement. Thank you. Laura says, thank you, wonderful change. Good. Yes, we're trying to make it easier for everyone. We know you have a lot of stuff going on, and so we want to reduce that reporting burden. So with that, what we are asking you to report on is information about each of your awards. And so for each of your sub-grantees, we ask that you tell us the year of the initial award, which should correspond to their program year 1 start date, typically. So in this case, they started in August 1st, 2016. That means their initial award was in 2016. And then you would specify the start date and end date for each program year, and then the total award. And you do that by specifying what proportion of the award is coming from the federal or the CNCS share and what proportion is coming from the grantee share. And then you would do that for each program year that you have with a particular sub-grantee, up to 5 program years. And then there's some cumulative totals here where it just automatically calculates what that total is across all of your years. But so if you are a returning grantee, this information is pre-populated with stuff from your old supplement, but if you've added any new stuff, we ask that you do include them on this tab. We ask that you update it to the best of your ability each reporting period. So if you've enrolled new subs since last fall, now's a great time to tell us about that. And just try to keep that information as complete as you can. If you do make any changes, we just ask that you highlight those changes in green, like we talked about, and let your program officer know. And then the last sub-related tab here is the sub-service sites tab. It's very similar in some ways to your sub-info tab, except that it's just asking you to list each service location on its own line. So some of you had asked some questions about, well, what counts as a service site? And so in general, that would be like an entity that you're working with. So, either a location where you're providing services or an entity with which you might have, for example, an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. And for each of those, we ask that you include a physical location, like a mailing address, with the full address through the ZIP+4 code. And again, that goes back to those congressional data requests where you want to really say, hey, like here's the real impact of a SIF in your community, and this lets us do that. So the more information you can provide us with, I know it can be tedious. Many of you have a lot of different service sites, but the more info you give us, the better we can advocate on behalf of the SIF in the future. All right, any questions about sub-awards or service sites before I move on to performance measures?
Once again, *1 for phone questions.
I am not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A.
And we do have a phone question coming through. One moment, please. We have a question from Susan Walsh. Your line is open.
Hi. Yes, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the sub-service sites tab and specifically around what sort of organizations related to MOUs you would want listed there. For instance, I work with Friends of the Children. We have MOUs related to data access, partnering with schools. Do you want us to list those sorts of MOU partners, or anyway, if you could just explain a little more about it, that'd be great.
That's a great question. I mean, in general, what we typically see reported here would be sites for where services are being provided. But I think, it could be a little bit broader. If you think that those organizations are really directly benefiting from the SIF and working, are sort of an integral part of your SIF award, I think considering including them could be useful. Katie, what do you think? Do you want to weigh in on this?
I do. So I would say that service sites are specifically locations where you provide direct services. So again, if one of those school memorandums of understanding that you had was where you delivered a nutrition program under your North Carolina SHAPE program, then that is what I would identify here, but not necessarily a memorandum of agreement for data access.
Susan, this is Kimberly. You and I can touch base after this because I think just knowing your guys' program model, we could talk through what would be a good fit for you guys.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly.
Great. Any other questions about service sites or sub-awards?
Nothing in the chat or my Q&A.
Nothing on the phones at this time.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on and talk about our last tab of the data supplement, which is our performance measures tab. So we have not made any significant changes to the performance measures tab, but I'll just quickly review that for those of you who are new. So with the performance measures, we ask that you select some performance measures that are a good fit for you and for your program. So if let's say you happen to be a program working in the economic opportunity focused area, if you're a program, say, focused on housing services, then you might be answering these 3 questions on housing. But so if you're not sure kind of which performance measures are most appropriate to you, I would encourage you to connect with your program officer, and they can provide some guidance around what performance measures are a best fit for your organization. We're not expecting that you're going to report on all of the performance measures, but just those that are really relevant to the key outcomes for your program. For performance measures, we ask that you provide a baseline assessment, and so those would be numbers of individuals who met that particular performance measure prior to the start of the SIF. So if you had like a program that was already operating, it's like how many individuals are they serving like each year kind of prior to the SIF. And that lets us know how that number has changed over time. If baseline information isn't available, so sometimes you just have no idea because you weren't tracking that before, that's okay. You can just leave that field blank. Or if it's a brand new program, you could put 0 for that. Also keeping in mind that these are performance measures across each of your subgrantees. So this would be for the whole portfolio. And then we also asked, so we've pre-populated your data supplement with information, cumulative information from your last reporting period. So the only thing that you're going to be filling out on these would be either baseline information if you have like new baselines to report on, or information for the current reporting period. So how many people, for example, for this first one, what is the number of economically disadvantaged individuals receiving housing services? And so you would say this is how many people we served during the current reporting period. Also, one thing that's important to note about this is that there are very specific definitions for each of these. So at the end of your user guide, there's an appendix where it has really clear instructions about what counts as economically disadvantaged, for example. So these are CNCF-wide performance measures, and they allow us to contribute data to understanding the impact of the SIF across, understanding the impact of CNCF programs across not only the SIF, but also AmeriCorps and Senior Corps. So it's really important that when you collect this data that you are reporting it using those CNCF definitions.
So we do have a question. Where do we find the full menu of performance measures to select from?
So this is it. These are the ones that you can select for SIF. There are other performance measures that some AmeriCorps or other programs are reporting on, but these are the ones that we've selected for the Social Innovation Fund. So if you are trying to figure out, okay, which ones apply to me, I would say you can look on the Performance Measures tab, or you can look at the end of the user guide. It has, in that appendix, it has all of the performance measures for SIF listed.
Great.
Okay, great. Only other things to note here, so the cumulative total calculates automatically. You can use the comment section to let us know any important information about these numbers. Just making sure that you're following the definition. So another thing that's worth mentioning with these performance measures is that when you look at the definitions, some of them are unduplicated counts. So we would encourage you to make sure that you are looking at the definition for the particular performance measure. And if they are asking for an unduplicated count, that you're really doing your best to provide that unduplicated number so that we can combine that with data from our other programs and feel confident in the quality of the data that we're receiving. In addition to the performance measures here, at the end of this tab, you'll also see that there's some information on beneficiaries. So we ask them whether or not you're currently targeting each of these 5 different demographic groups. And if you are, we ask that you provide information on how many individuals you've served within these demographic groups. And then you're also going to be providing information on the total number of unique beneficiaries served by your program. And that would include information in terms of your targets. This should actually be targets. And so that would be your target across the entire grant. And then the cumulative number of individuals that has been served as of the prior reporting period. And then you would update that with information for the current reporting period. Any questions about performance measures? You can hit *1 now if you would like, or you can chat it.
Operator, do we have any questions on the line?
We may have one coming through at this time. One moment, please.
Great. We also just got a question that could you also let them know about the scaling component?
That's a great question. So we have removed the scaling component from this round of the data supplement. So if you all had previously been reporting on scaling, so in our former data supplement, we asked about the number of new states, number of new cities, and and like the number of new sites that you had added. And we are not asking about that in the data supplement anymore, but we are still asking for reports on scaling progress just in the narrative. And that's largely because it was difficult to standardize that information across grantees, and so it makes more sense to really look at it within the context of your narrative report. And we don't also want you reporting the same information in multiple locations. We're trying to reduce that level of reporting burden. So we are still asking for it, but not in the data supplement.
Thank you. Okay, did we have a question on the line?
Thank you. We do have one question from Sarah Van Slambrook. Your line is open.
Yes, as we're thinking about which of these indicators that we are tracking as a grantee, do we pick some now and then we just report on those same ones over time, or can they change over time? How do we decide as a grantee which of these that we use, and then are they consistent over time, or do they change?
That's a great question. I would say first step, talk to your program officer, because really they're going to be the best person to advise you about, which performance measures are the best fit for your program. That being said, I think it makes sense. We are really interested in tracking the same set of performance measures over time. So, we would encourage you to think about performance measures that make sense for your portfolio and that can be tracked over time. We do see situations where, let's say, a grantee has a couple of different sub-grantees, and maybe they have a sub-grantee that's doing, childhood literacy, and that sub-grantee exits the portfolio, and then there's no longer, any outcomes in that. And that's fine. That sort of thing can happen. But you just want to make sure that we're reporting on that consistently. And that's also a great place where, in that comment section, you might say, well, yeah, we served, 300 kids in our literacy program last year, but that sub-grantee has exited the portfolio, and so there's no new beneficiary. And that helps us know a little bit more about the context for those measures. Did anybody else in the room want to add thoughts on that? I see heads shaking, so I think we're good. But yeah, so I would say check in with your program officer. The more information you can provide us with, the better we can really advocate for you and for your program. So, if there's multiple outcome measures that are relevant, I would encourage you to think about how you could collect data on them. But I think that's it. Does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Great. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat or Q&A or hit star 1.
We can also open it up to if folks have any other more general questions. If there's a question that came up about a tab we've already gone over and you want to go back, you felt like you didn't have a chance to ask it, now's a great time. Really just, we're pretty open.
Will the Office of Grants be adding on reporting if you all are removing the financial information?
That's a great question. So we're in ongoing discussions with the Office of Grants Management about reporting things, but to the best of my knowledge, they're not intending to make any of those changes for the current FFR. The one caveat to that is that I do know that they are asking in the comment section of the FFR to provide a breakdown of funds that are going, of the grantee share. So what portion of that is the sub-match versus the grantee match. Which I think has been in the instructions previously, but you should have received a memo about that, so I would really refer to them. They're the experts on that grants management piece. But this breakdown of the expenditures, say, at the sub-level is not information that I believe they're collecting at this time. Katie, do you want to weigh in on that? Any other thoughts?
I would additionally state that while they might not, Office of Grants Management might not be collecting information on sub-grantee expenditures at this time, it is still something that, as a grantee, you're held accountable for overseeing and monitoring yourself. So, again, we're no longer expecting expenditures to be reported on the data supplement. There are lines that crosswalk with the FFR on some of those expenditures, and additional information from the Office of Grants Management should be forthcoming in the next probably 4 to 6 months on how they will begin monitoring different activities.
I'll also just make a plug. We always encourage you to get started on this early. so that if you do have questions, you can contact us. I'm happy to answer questions over email or hop on the phone if you need to work out an issue, and I'm sure the POs feel the same way. But it's a lot easier for us to do that if it happens sooner than later. So we encourage you to just go ahead and start filling out your data supplement and letting us know like what questions you have.
We do have another question, and it says, so on the grantee and sub-grantee tabs, we don't need to report a dollar amount.
The grantee and sub-grantee tabs, we don't need to report a dollar amount. Could you clarify for that what dollar amount you mean? Do you mean for expenditures or for match? So we are asking for you to report on match received at the grantee and the sub-grantee level, and so there is a dollar amount associated with that. But we are not asking you to report on sub-grantee match on the sub-info tab. So previously on the sub-awards tab.
Sorry, she meant the match tab.
Okay, yes, we are not asking you to report on match funds received on either of the match tabs. That's correct. So that is a substantial change from the prior reporting. So we're just asking you to list the funders, where they're located, are they active, are they inactive?
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
And no phone questions at this time.
Great. I'm not seeing any more chat or Q&A questions, so I think we might be good.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, and I'll let Katie do our final closing, but don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions.
Thank you, Becca, very much. So again, as Becca mentioned, please reach out to your program officers if you need any clarification on the information that has been presented today. As program officers, we're also very happy to help coordinate a one-on-one call with Becca if need be. So at this time, we appreciate you for taking the time to attend our webinar. The webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Knowledge Network and distributed via email as a link within the coming week. So thank you all very much, and have a pleasant Thursday afternoon. Bye.